So this is the final criteria of outcome 1 for the theory unit that you need to pass. So I'm going to need you to look at some information and gather some information on filters. We're going to look at camera filters specifically. And usually they go on the front of the lens of the camera. Often they're round. Some are square, so these are Koken filters. There were also a few other makes that made square ones as well, that went into a filter holder, but mostly they're round. The most common one that you find on older cameras, and often is on the camera when you buy it, is a UV filter or a skylight filter, and it's usually just there just to protect the front element of the lens. It does have a purpose. So in situations where you have a lot of haze, a UV filter will help to cut through that. And of course now with digital equipment, we've got a dehaze filter in Lightroom. So often a lot of these filters that we use on cameras are replaced really by what we can do in Lightroom. This is another example of the dehaze filter being used, the skylight filter or UV. Back in the day, we used to have color compensating filters that were also used for printing, but we used to. I can remember in my camera bag having a whole box full of these Kodak Raton filters, which were color compensating. So they were gelatine, and they went into a holder, which then went onto the front of the lens. And they were used for things like last week when we talked about color temperature. So they were used to balance color temperature. So this is an 85B in use. So the photographer is using tungsten film here in daylight, and by adding an 85B filter, which looks like that, you're able to balance the light. The reverse is true. So if you're using daylight film, using tungsten light, you need an 80B filter. So this is on the left. This is normal daylight film, shot in a studio using tungsten lighting without a filter, and then on the right with an 80B, which looks something like that. The filters I most commonly use nowadays for black and white photography are 3 color filters. I use yellow, and I use red, and I use orange. And what they do in black and white photography and black and white film photography is they increase contrast. So a red is the stronger, orange in the middle somewhere, yellow a little bit weaker. But that gives you an idea of the contrast control using coloured filters, yellow, red or orange filters. This one, as you can see, is a simulated image, so something that somebody's made in Photoshop or Lightroom, to give you an idea of how that works. But this is give you an idea of how a yellow filter would work, and that's how a red filter would work. And it does actually happen like that, and you do get an increase in contrast. So color filters in black and white photography will darken their complementary colors and lighten their own color. So a red filter is going to darken the blue sky. The other one, which is useful in digital photography as well, is a polarizing filter. And what a polarizing filter does is it cuts out specular reflection, and it breaks through even more of the haze, increases contrast as well. So it's 2 filters actually. So there's 2 sheets of glass, and you can turn one against the other to create the effect. So that's the effect with just increasing contrast. So you can see how that in color really works to increase contrast. But if you use it to cut out specular reflection, so we take the thicker yellow line as being the specular reflection that we want to cut out, and the polarizing filter will have that effect. So what it will do in practice, if you're photographing something with reflection, so like water, so you're getting a lot of light being reflected off the surface of the water the polarizing filter will cut through that and allow you to see to the bottom of the water. Same with glass. So the picture on the left, you can see there's lots of reflection from the building above. The picture on the right is used the polarizing filter, where you turn one piece against another. They're etched pieces of glass, and you can see it has cut through the reflection. The other filter we use quite a lot in film photography, certainly to an extent in digital photography, are neutral density filters. And what they do is they cut down the amount of light that's coming in through the camera, so it allows you to use slower shutter speeds or wider apertures if you want to get shallower depth of field. So for instance, if you're photographing moving water and you want that water to look creamy and movement, you might use a neutral density filter to cut the shutter speed down to 1 second or 2 seconds, so that you're working with much slower shutter speed. All it does, neutral density, it doesn't change the color, it's neutral, and density, it adds density, it makes it makes the amount of light that's coming in less. You can get neutral density filters as graduated filters, so that you just darken skies. So you can use a graduated filter just to pull down some darker sky. So for instance, this sunset, so the foreground is correctly exposed. The sky is lighter than the one on the left, is lighter than we would like it to be. So we use a neutral density filter to darken that down to give us a richer sunset. So what I'd like you to do, as normal with the other exercises, is just to find out what you can about filters, use illustrations, but just write that up into a Word document and submit that into your submissions folder. You can do that this afternoon.